Esteemed Chancellor, reviewing professors of the Golden Board, and fellow students, welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to stand before you today in the Astral Theater of Centroid Academia to defend my final year projection thesis. In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into my macroeconomics model on our glorious civilization. Because, as we all know, projecting our consciousness into a perfectly simulated universe, well, that doesn't just take immense computational power. It requires a fundamental understanding of the economic engine that actually sustains it all. So today, we're going to dissect the very fabric of our post-scarcity reality and map out the incredible economic power dynamics that keep our worlds thriving.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We'll start by laying down the post-scarcity foundation. Then we'll trace the money through the golden loop and ascend all the way up to the zenith peak apex. From there, we'll break down the highly lucrative exports of the monks and finally wrap things up with a little concept I call the Great Snobbery.
All right, part one, the post-scarcity foundation.
To truly grasp our economic supremacy, we really have to look back at the historical exodus. Think about it. Eons ago, literally, the wealthiest 0.01% of Milky Way humanoids funded the Andromeda Arc. Why? To escape their sector's heat death. And because of that massive initial investment, we achieved the post-scarcity existence we enjoy today. And it's all anchored in one absolutely crucial piece of technology, the Flexbox. It's essentially a quantum computer, but remarkably tiny, like about the size of a jewelry box. But inside, it contains a fully simulated, completely user-defined pocket multiverse. This right here is the foundational unit of all Andromeda wealth. Here at Centroid Academia, we spend years learning how to project our consciousness into these exact boxes. Think about the implications. If physical physics fail, or the physical universe simply dies out, our consciousness stays perfectly intact inside the Flexbox, where we literally define time and space ourselves. We have, quite literally, engineered a way to outlive physical reality.
Moving right along to part two, the golden loop. Let's move to and see how this builds, because our post-scarcity tech doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It fuels an intensely guarded closed loop of high-end luxury trade that we call the golden loop. Honestly, it's a total marvel of economic design. It kicks off with step one, Aurelia Prime. This is the seat of gold, where literal floating cities hover above oceans of liquid platinum. They mint the Andromeda credit and provide all the initial funding. That massive wealth then flows right into step two, Quantum Forge. Over there, on a freezing, high-tech world covered in massive server towers, the Silicon Lords manufacture the physical flex boxes. Those finished boxes are then shipped straight to step three, which is right here, back at Centroid Academia. And our role? We map the astral planes and use these very boxes to educate and train the heirs of Aurelia Prime. Those heirs will, of course, one day sit on the golden board, completely closing this perfect self-sustaining loop of wealth, hardware, and knowledge. Which brings us to part three, the zenith peak apex.
Now, the golden loop is amazing, but it's really just the engine. The actual steering wheel of our civilization, that's zenith peak. It's this biological sanctuary planet wrapped entirely in a glowing, iridescent, perpetual mist. Now, what's really interesting about this next bit is the actual breakdown of that mist. Get this, the air is only 40% nitrogen and 10% oxygen. The remaining 50%? It is a staggering concentration of high-density DNA repair nanites, meaning when you take a breath on zenith peak, the air itself is stopping your cellular decay in real time. If you get a scratch, it heals before a single drop of blood can even form. Aging is, for all intents and purposes, completely halted. Their atmosphere is literally a breathable soup of medical perfection.
Naturally, a world that optimized needs a completely unique form of governance. Zenith Peak is ruled by the Ascendant monks. In academia, we classify them as efficiency architects, and their core doctrine is just fascinating. They actually believe that physical reality is just a poorly coded simulation, and to have a clear spirit, you need a perfectly optimized physical container. So they govern through something called quietism. They don't waste time issuing clunky traditional laws, no way. Instead, they just subtly adjust the planetary frequency to nudge the population's behavior toward total harmony.
Let's look closer at that in part four, exports of the monks.
So you might be wondering, why exactly do these monks sit above even the Silicon Lords of Quantum Forge in our grand trade ecosystem? Well, it all comes down to the sheer value of their economic exports. Because let's face it, hardware is completely useless without the divine spark of perfect logic. The Silicon Lords might build a box, sure, but the monks provide what I call the software of the self. They make the logic inside feel soulful instead of just robotic. First up, they export Zenith code.
These are proprietary optimization scripts that allow a Flexbox to predict what a user desires before the user even realizes they want it. It's wild. Second, they export nanite vials. These are super concentrated samples of their healing atmosphere, which the ultra elites back on Aurelia Prime buy up to use as essentially immortality perfumes. And finally, they offer astral auditing. This is top-tier Velvet Void security for the Shadow Syndics, ensuring our networks stay entirely free of any dirty, unoptimized consciousness signatures.
And you can't exactly stay at the apex of the universe without absolute security. But the monks, they don't use anything as crude or uncivilized as conventional railguns or sabers. If some primitive ship makes the mistake of approaching zenith peak, the monks just direct their atmospheric nanite cloud outward. The cloud simply deconstructs the invading vessel's hull at a molecular level. It is wonderfully efficient. Actually, they even repurpose the scrap metal from the attacking ships into their prayer beads, and they usually get this done before the primitive crew even realizes they've been intercepted and are just floating out there in the vacuum. It's a defense mechanism that is just as elegant as it is terrifying.
And finally, Part 5. The Great Snobbery.
This perfectly brings my thesis to its macro-societal conclusion. It's an exploration of our, frankly, deeply justified elitism. When you really understand the vast disparity between our flawlessly optimized systems and the rest of the cosmos, it inevitably leads to a mindset I call the Great Snobbery. And this brilliantly illustrates that zenith peak mindset. I quote, "Why would one travel in a ship when one can simply be everywhere at once? The Milky Way is a tragedy of unoptimized atoms." To an Andromedan, the very idea of physically traveling through the damp, chaotic Hydroverse is just clunky. We only ever trade with those lesser systems for raw materials, and even then, strictly through heavily armed robotic intermediaries.
Just to really drive home our systemic supremacy, let's look at a direct comparison. On one side, you have our optimized Andromeda. We're talking reality-folding yachts, pocket multiverses safely tucked into flexboxes, and true undeniable post-scarcity. On the other side, you have the primitive remnants of the Milky Way, like the Canis Dwarf sector. I mean, over there, thumb-sized micro-humanoids literally live in fur villages on the backs of giant elephant-sized dogs. They are trading medicinal herbs for micro-field tools in a literal biological flea trade, all while constantly fighting off parasite glitches like these awful robotic tick droids. So while we are out here shaping the very fabric of reality itself, they are stuck playing a chaotic game of survival riding on the backs of physical steeds.
So the crucial point is this. When we look out from the glowing, perfect mountains of Zenith Peak, or as we sit back in our liquid platinum recliners right here at Centroid Academia, we really have to ask ourselves about the true nature of existence. By achieving this closed loop of absolute luxury, by folding reality and conquering entropy itself, we haven't just improved life, we have redefined it. And so I want to leave the examining board with this final provocative thought. If you exist outside of optimized post-scarcity, if you aren't literally breathing 50% nanites with every breath, are you even really alive? Thank you so much, professors. I am now ready for your questions.